What if I told you that the story of the Library of Alexandria's destruction isn't as simple as you might think? The culprit behind this historical tragedy may not be who you expect. In fact, there might not be just one culprit at all. Over the next few minutes, we'll dig into a 2,000-year-old cold case that will make you rethink one of history's biggest losses. As we look at the evidence, you'll see the fall of the Library of Alexandria in a whole new way, one that might surprise you and change how you view this ancient mystery. The birth of a legend. Picture Alexandria in 300 BCE, a busy city on the Mediterranean coast. Founded by Alexander the Great, it was about to become home to one of the ancient world's most amazing creations. Ptolemy says, Soter, Egypt's first Macedonian ruler, dreamed of building a learning center that would be the envy of the world. This dream would become the Library of Alexandria. Ptolemy's plan was ambitious, and his dynasty spent big to make it happen. They sent people all over the Mediterranean to find books, and even made ships coming to Alexandria hand over their books for copying. The library's collection grew fast, covering topics like math, astronomy, physics, nature, and literature from all over the known world. The great library attracted the smartest people of its time. Eratosthenes, who ran the library, figured out the Earth's size using just shadows and math. Archimedes, the famous mathematician and inventor, worked on his ideas about levers and pulleys here. Euclid wrote his geometry book, Elements, and Herophilus studied human bodies, setting the stage for modern anatomy. The library wasn't just a place to keep books. It had lecture halls, meeting rooms, and gardens for thinking. The Mouseion, or Temple of the Muses, was a research center where scholars lived and worked. They made discoveries in everything from astronomy to geography, changing how people thought about the world. At its peak, the Library of Alexandria stood as a symbol of human knowledge and curiosity. Its huge collection was powerful in a world where alliances changed and armies conquered. The stage was set for a clash between the search for knowledge and the tough realities of the ancient world, a story that would play out over the coming centuries. Caesar's siege, the first blow. The year is 48 BCE, and Alexandria is on edge as Julius Caesar arrives in Egypt. His presence throws the power struggle between young Ptolemy XIII and his sister Cleopatra into chaos. Cornered by Ptolemy's forces, Caesar makes a bold move. He orders the burning of ships in the harbor. This tactical decision quickly gets out of hand. Strong winds spread the fire from the harbor to the tightly packed city buildings. Soon, whole neighborhoods are up in flames. Smoke fills the air, along with the screams of terrified citizens. As the fire rages on, it gets dangerously close to the great Library of Alexandria. Historians still argue about how much the fire actually damaged the library. Writers like Strabo and Plutarch, who lived not long after, don't mention any harm to the library. This silence hints that it might have escaped the worst of the blaze. But then there's Seneca, who claims 40,000 scrolls were lost. Some experts think this might have been from a warehouse near the library, not the main building itself. We may never know exactly what happened, but one thing's clear. Caesar's siege changed everything for Alexandria and its famous library. The fire showed just how vulnerable the city's treasure trove of knowledge really was. As the flames died down and the smoke cleared, Alexandria started the long process of rebuilding. The library had survived its first big threat, but the city would never be quite the same again. The rise of Christianity and the Serapeum's fall, Alexandria, in the late 300 CE, was changing fast. Christianity was taking over from the old pagan ways, putting the city at the heart of a big shift. The streets, once full of scholarly talk, now rang with angry shouts. Fighting broke out now and then, showing how deeply divided the city had become. Some religious leaders even started to see libraries, once loved for their knowledge, as suspicious places. In the middle of all this stood the Serapeum, a huge temple to the god Serapis. It held a smaller library, about a tenth the size of the great Library of Alexandria, but still very important. In 391 CE, Theophilus, the Christian leader of Alexandria, who hated paganism, decided to attack this last stronghold of the old beliefs. He led a Christian mob that quickly destroyed the Serapeum, leaving it in ruins. This wasn't just about losing a building or some books. It showed that the old way of life, which had supported the library for centuries, was ending. The idea of seeking knowledge from all over the world, no matter where it came from, was fading away. As the 300s ended, Alexandria was at a turning point. The fall of the Serapeum meant the end of its golden age of learning. The city that was once the smartest place in the ancient world now pushed aside or silenced its brightest thinkers. But even as this chapter closed, new powers were growing. To the east, a force was rising that would soon change the whole region. Alexandria and its famous library weren't done yet, but things were about to change in a big way. Hypatia, the last librarian. As the 5th century began, Alexandria's intellectual scene was led by Hypatia, a brilliant philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer. Her work and teaching kept the city's spirit of learning alive despite earlier setbacks. But tensions were growing. Christians, pagans, and Jews clashed more often, and their fights spilled into the streets. Hypatia, being pagan and close to the city's leaders, became a target. In 415 CE, things took a terrible turn. A Christian mob attacked and killed Hypatia in a brutal way that shocked everyone. This wasn't just about one person dying. It was an attack on the free-thinking Alexandria was known for. After Hypatia's death, things changed a lot. People couldn't share ideas as freely anymore, and Christian rules took over. The famous Library of Alexandria, already struggling, became even less important. But learning didn't stop completely. Christian scholars started mixing old knowledge with their religious ideas. They kept some ancient wisdom, but changed how people looked at it. It seemed like Alexandria's glory days were over, but the story wasn't finished yet. A new power was growing in the east, and it would bring one last surprise for the Library of Alexandria. The Islamic conquest, the final chapter. As the 600s began, Alexandria faced a new challenge. In 640 CE, Muslim armies led by Amr ibn al-As marched toward the city. Once a great center of learning, Alexandria had declined due to years of neglect and religious conflicts. The siege lasted several months. Despite fierce resistance from the city's defenders and Byzantine reinforcements, the Muslim forces eventually won. In 642 CE, after a tough battle, Alexandria fell to Amr ibn al-As's armies. After the conquest, a famous story spread. It claimed that Caliph Omar ordered Alexandria's remaining books destroyed, saying they were either unnecessary or against Islamic beliefs. The tale describes fires burning for 6 months, fueled by ancient knowledge. But modern historians doubt this story. It first appeared in records 300 years after it supposedly happened, which makes its accuracy questionable. There's also little proof that many books were still in Alexandria when the Muslims arrived. The library's fate is further muddled by biased historical accounts. Writers like Plutarch, Edward Gibbon, and Bishop Gregory Bar Hebraeus all had their own agendas, making it hard to know what really happened to the library. Looking at the evidence, a different picture forms. The library's treasures were probably lost long before the Muslim invasion. Years of neglect, books being moved, and earlier destruction had already reduced the once great library to almost nothing. This changes how we think about the library's end. Instead of one big destruction, it seems the library slowly declined over time. Its fall wasn't caused by one conqueror, but by centuries of political problems, changing priorities, and the passage of time. As Alexandria entered its new chapter under Islamic rule, the true story of the library's final years remains unclear. The real events were likely much more complicated than the dramatic stories we've heard for centuries. Unraveling the mystery. A multifaceted decline. The Library of Alexandria didn't fall in one big event. Instead, it slowly declined over centuries. While many people think of specific moments like Julius Caesar's siege or the rise of Christianity as key turning points, the real story is more complicated. Caesar's siege in 48 BCE is often seen as the first major hit to the library, but historians disagree on what actually happened. Some say the library wasn't touched, while others claim 40,000 scrolls were lost. This shows how hard it is to pin down exactly what caused the library's downfall. Christianity's rise in the 300s CE was another important factor. When Patriarch Theophilus destroyed the Serapeum in 391 CE, it showed how priorities were changing. As Christianity became more powerful, studying non-religious topics often clashed with church teachings. This made it harder for the library to keep doing its work. Political problems played a big role too. The Ptolemaic dynasty, which used to support the library, got weaker over time. This left the library with less money and support. As Alexandria became less important for learning, fewer resources went to keeping the library going. But maybe the biggest problem was just neglect. Scrolls slowly fell apart, lost or damaged texts weren't replaced, and scholars started focusing on other things. This slow decay was probably just as damaging as any big event. By the time of the Islamic conquest in 642 CE, Alexandria wasn't the center of knowledge it once was. The story about Caliph Omar burning the library is now thought to be made up. Historians don't think there was much of a collection left by then. The Library of Alexandria's story shows us how even the greatest places can fall apart if we're not careful. It reminds us that we need to constantly work to protect knowledge, not just during big crises, but all the time. As we think about what happened to the library, we should consider how to protect our own knowledge for the future so we don't repeat the same mistakes. Legacy and lessons. The library's enduring impact. The Library of Alexandria still fascinates us today. Over time, its story has grown from a real historical place into a symbol of human knowledge and learning. We often picture it as this amazing center of wisdom, with huge rooms full of scrolls and brilliant scholars debating big ideas. But the real library was probably more complicated than that. It was impressive for its time, with an incredible collection of texts and smart people from all over the ancient world. But it also had to deal with the politics and social issues of its day, just like any other place. Even though it's gone, the library still inspires us. Today, we have projects like the Digital Library of Alexandria that try to capture its spirit by making knowledge available to everyone online. It shows how we've always wanted to gather and share information across time and space. The library's story is especially relevant now as we think about how to preserve information, make it accessible, and deal with how technology is changing things. We can learn a lot from what happened to the library. One big lesson is that we need to actively protect knowledge. The library declined over centuries, which shows that even the biggest collections can be lost if we don't take care of them. Today, that means we need good ways to preserve digital information and keep supporting physical libraries too. Another important point is the value of open access to information. The Library of Alexandria tried to collect texts from all over the world and make them available to scholars. This idea is still important today as we talk about open access in academic publishing and how public libraries should work in the digital age. As we face new challenges in preserving and sharing information, the Library of Alexandria still has a lot to teach us. It's both inspiring and a cautionary tale, reminding us to value our intellectual heritage while also adapting to new technology. The library might be gone, but its ideas live on, helping us figure out how to preserve knowledge in the 21st century and beyond. The Library of Alexandria's decline wasn't sudden, but a slow process over centuries. Political unrest, religious conflicts, and shifting priorities all contributed to its downfall. From Caesar's fire to the rise of Christianity and the Islamic conquest, each era brought new problems that weakened the library. Perhaps the biggest issue was simple neglect, as scrolls rotted and weren't replaced, and the library became less important over time. The library's story reminds us how fragile knowledge can be and why we need to protect it. Today, projects like the Internet Archive are trying to do what the library did, saving our collective wisdom for the future. These efforts show us that keeping knowledge safe takes constant work and dedication. The fall of the Library of Alexandria has big lessons for us today. As we deal with the digital age, we face new challenges in saving our intellectual heritage. With technology changing so fast and so much information being created every day, we need new ways to preserve it all. We have to learn from the past and understand that it's our job to protect knowledge for the next generation. By making this a priority, we're not just honoring great places like the Library of Alexandria, but making sure that what we know and discover today will still be around centuries from now. This is our duty, to guard human knowledge carefully, so we don't lose the wisdom we've gained over time.